Genesis chapter 8, verse 20 is where we left off, because the last three verses of Genesis chapter 8 work well, and they fit directly into Genesis chapter 9. The very first thing I'd like to mention on the top of the outline, there was a question last week about when Noah removes the covering from the ark with his sons, what the covering was. So I went and looked up the word. The word covering is used of this covering, and it's used of the covering of the tabernacle of Exodus through the rest of the Bible, and nowhere else. So based on the fact that someone used of those, we're talking about a skin covering that would have been waterproof, not part of the boat. Seems pretty clear with that word only being used of the tabernacle. There are lots of other times the word covering is used in the Bible, but none of them are this Hebrew word. So, review of Genesis chapter 8. In Genesis chapter 8, the flood has ended. So we've gone through the entire flood. Noah and his family have spent what seems to be almost exactly a year with the waters going up, the waters coming back down. Then once the ark is stuck on the mountain, waiting several months until God told them to leave the ark. So, we see Noah and his family delivered, and we see all the animals with him delivered, and everything else destroyed. God's purpose and judgment was accomplished, and his faithfulness in delivering Noah held just as true here. That's Genesis chapter 8 that we've covered so far. Do I have a volunteer to read Genesis chapter 8, verses 20 through 22? Verses 20 through 22. Yes. Oh, go ahead. Yes. Yes.
And Noah builded an altar unto the Lord, and took up every clean beast and every clean fowl, and offered burnt offerings on the altar. And the Lord smelled a sweet savor. And the Lord said in his heart, I will not again curse the ground anymore for the imagination of man's heart is evil from his youth. Neither will I again smite any more everything living as I have done. When the earth remained, while the earth remained, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer, day and night, shall not cease.
Thank you. So, Noah has just brought out all the animals from the ark. And the very first thing that he did, instead of trying to set up farming, set up a living for himself, the very first thing he does is he builds an altar. The fact that he built an altar means God has already given some sort of instructions for how people were to sacrifice to him. Otherwise, why would you ever build an altar? Why would you think of an altar? As far as we know, the earth had no false religions before the flood. There's no certainty there, but as far as we know, that didn't happen. Regardless, Noah is building an altar because he believes that is the way to sacrifice to God. How would he know that unless he were directed in that way? So he builds an altar. He takes every clean beast and every clean fowl. This has come up once before in the book, but clean and unclean for the Israelites were based on what they could eat and what they couldn't eat. Up to this point, people couldn't eat any animals. So what does clean and unclean mean? It has to be clean and unclean for sacrifice. How would they know that? Once again, God would have had to reveal it. The only way they would know clean and unclean animals is God revealing. So he knows which animals the Lord desired to sacrifice. He builds an altar. He offers sacrifices of each of them. The very first thing he did upon leaving the ark definitely shows his heart. I was thinking of what would be my first thoughts after being stuck in the same place for a full year. I don't know directly if they would be sacrificing or not, although there would be the gratefulness now that they are allowed to leave the ark and that God has protected them. That would be very, very real in their hearts. So, Noah sacrifices all these animals, and it says here, God smelled a sweet savor. We don't use the word savor anymore to mean it. It means aroma. You smelled a sweet smell. If any of you have ever seen that type of sacrifice. It's basically you burn the animal charred and everything, you burn it to ash. And the smell is absolutely horrible to a human perspective whenever you burn anything like that. Why does God consider the smell of sacrifice a sweet aroma? Because obviously, to the human side, it's not. First thing, God always appreciates sacrifice. In any area, whatever we sacrifice anything to God, we are honoring God, and showing honor to God is an area that pleases the Lord. Also, there is a very real concept so far of there needs to be a sacrifice for sin. Going all the way back to the first sin in the garden, and the Lord taking the life of the animal or animals to make clothing for Adam and Eve, is showing that sin has the responsibility for death. There is a sacrifice that needs to be paid for it. And lastly, we see from this that almost certainly Noah was obeying and doing exactly what God said. God had already ordained, okay, you sacrifice me using clean animals, using an altar like this. So Noah builds an altar, he sacrifices. He's obeying God. When we obey God, we honor him, and that pleases him. All those the same. Those are reasons why the Lord smelled a sweet aroma, why the Lord was pleased with this. So, make a note in verse 21, the rest of it, what the Lord promises. He won't curse the ground anymore. The imagination of man's heart is still evil from his youth, and he won't again smite every living thing as he has done, because we'll come back to that. That's basically part of the Noahic covenant. So take a note of the rest of verse 21. Let's go briefly now to the purpose of Genesis chapter 9. What's Genesis chapter 9 going to teach? Yes. Yes.
A couple things to clarify. The clean beasts that would sort of hinder. If it was part of the two, okay, now remember there were 7.
Yes.
Did it say those were clean?
Yes, it says 7 of every clean animal and 7 of every bird.
So you said, I believe it's 7 unclean and 7 clean.
No, only 2 unclean, male and the female, and 7 pairs of clean animals. Not just 7, but 7 pairs for the birds and for the clean animals. No problem.
And then on the, I will not again curse the ground anymore.
Yes.
Because we still see aspects of fall in nature.
Yes.
So when he says not again, what is he referring to? You understand what I'm asking?
Yes, I do. I have that in point 5 of the outline.
Okay, we can wait.
So,
Okay.
the changes of the earth, because that is very important. God says he'll never again curse the ground anymore. We still see a lot of aspects of God's curse and sin, so what happened? So, purpose of Genesis chapter 9 is God's promise to Noah and all generations. It's called the Noahic covenant, meaning the covenant to Noah, but you'll see in this passage, God promises his covenant to all generations through Noah, which, by the way, would be true of several of the other covenants in the Bible as well. God promises a covenant, a promise to all generations through Abraham. God promises a promise to all generations through David, and the same with the new covenant. The one covenant that is not the same is the covenant of the law. The covenant given to Moses is not promised to all generations in the same way. So we see this is Genesis chapter 9. We also see Noah in his relationship with Shem, Ham, and Japheth. That will be the end of the chapter. That will be what we cover next week. One of the most difficult stories in the Bible. But all that to say, it's Noah and his relationship with Shem, Ham, and Japheth. So, we look at God's commands now. The first thing Noah says in chapter 9, verse 1, and God blessed Noah and his sons, and said unto them, be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth. 3 commands here. Be fruitful basically just means to bear fruit, and it's talking about children. Multiply, the word exactly means to multiply, to keep growing, that there will be more of you. Replenish the earth, the word exactly means fill, both when it's used originally to Adam and Eve and when it's used here. It means filled all the way up, not filled to overflowing, but it means filled all the way up. In this case, to fill the earth all the way up is the idea that God is using here. And that is important. The people who are arguing for a gap theory, that is, there were millions of years before Genesis chapter 1, verse 2, use the argument the word replenish is used here and back in Genesis chapter 1 when God told Adam and Eve to replenish the earth, completely neglecting the point. The Hebrew word means fill it all the way up. It doesn't mean replenish as in things have been destroyed and now you need to pick up the pieces and rebuild it. It's not that usage of the word. If you go to very old dictionaries, you will see the word replenish has more than one meaning, and the other meaning is the one the King James translators were using. It's not that the translators mistranslated this word, it's that the word replenish has lost meaning in the last several hundred years. So he tells him, be fruitful, bear children, multiply, so keep multiplying, growing, and replenish the earth, fill it all the way up. And what other commands? Let's go ahead and read Genesis chapter 9, verses 1 through 7. Go ahead, Steve.
God blessed Noah and his sons and said unto them, be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth. The fear of you and the dread of you shall be upon every beast of the earth, upon every fowl of the air, upon all that moveth upon all the earth, upon all the fishes of the sea. In your hand are they delivered. Every moving thing that liveth shall be meat for you, even as the green herb have I given all things. Flesh with life thereof, blood thereof, shall you not eat. Surely your blood of your lives I will require at the hand of every beast, I will require at the hand of man, at the hand of man's brother I will require the life of man. Whoso shed man's blood by man shall be his blood be shed. The image of God made man. And you be fruitful and multiply and bring forth abundantly in the earth and multiply therein.
Thank you. So the reason we're stopping in verse 7 is those are the last commands God gives in this passage. After this, he talks and will focus on his promise to Noah and to all generations. So, the first command we see is chapter 9, verse 4. Besides the three we've already talked about, chapter 9, verse 4, but flesh with the life thereof, which is the blood thereof, shall ye not eat. God commands everybody in the world to not eat the blood. He says, I've given you all animals, not just clean animals. I've given you all animals to eat, but do not eat the life of the flesh, which is the blood. This is one reason, I believe, why the disciples in Acts decided in Acts chapter 15 that one of the commands they were going to require of the Gentiles is to not eat blood. It's given to all men here. It's given to all men again in those passages in the New Testament. What are the main reasons? One is you're showing you honor life of creatures. All creatures are created by God, not all in his image. They're all created by God. That's one. Two is it's just obedience to God's command. From the human perspective, the easiest way to get a whole ton of diseases very quickly is to eat blood. There's all sorts of diseases, sicknesses, so on and so forth in it. It causes problems, all of that to say. There are very good reasons not to. And when God gave people all to eat, he said, do not eat the blood. Now it's interesting when we get to the law in the Old Testament, which I probably will not teach. if you get there in your reading, you will find out God gives them instructions for cooking as well. Here there's no instructions about cooking, it's just eat anything, don't eat the blood. What else do we have? In verse 6, chapter 9, verse 6, whoso sheddeth man's blood, by man shall his blood be shed. And God stating that in a way that is a command, for in the image of God made he man. We see it reinstated that man is still made in the image of God, even with all the sin, even with all the evil. Man is still made in God's image, and because of this, God is instituting the first punishment for murder. Murder happened before, in the fall, from the fall to the flood, probably a lot more than we know. We know God dealt with it with Cain, and we know God didn't deal directly with it with Lamech. Although God always judges sin, there are always consequences, internal and external. But there's no direct way that God stepped in with Lamech of Cain's line and the murder he committed. We assume with the earth being filled with violence before the flood that there was a lot more murder going on. And now God, basically, it's been very, very clear that man left on himself, things get worse and worse, more and more problems, and God steps in and institutes, here's your first responsibility to punish sin. If there's any murder, it's called retributive justice. Take life for life. If there is a murder committed, make sure the murderer is executed so that, one, you're honoring the image of God in man. Man is special. No person has the right to take the life of any other, ever. Well, I'll say it this way. In the sense of murder, absolutely. Then we have the second part here. The idea of shedding man's blood is this blood being poured on the ground. This word is actually used when Moses pours the blood of the Nile River on the ground, or when God tells him, if they didn't believe your first signs, take water and pour it and it will become blood when you pour it on the ground. It's used like that. Blood poured on the ground. We're not talking about just an injury. This word is used of killing, or in those cases of all the blood being poured on the ground. So, right after that, we have God's last commands here. Be fruitful and multiply, same as verse 1. God's restating those. Bring forth abundantly in the earth and multiply therein. Bring forth abundantly has the idea, as soon as I get to my notes, of Exodus 1:7, which is the people grew more and more in Egypt until the Egyptians were terrified of the Israelites. It's a very, very strong word. It basically means the waters teemed with life. When God creates fish, he uses the same word here. It basically means to grow and grow and grow, like grow into swarms, basically. Bring forth abundantly is basically lots and lots of people. And multiply therein, same idea as multiply further up in verse 7. Just multiply as you bring forth abundantly is the idea. It reminded me of God saying to Abraham, blessing I will bless you, and multiplying will I multiply. He's saying, bring forth abundantly, really strong word like swarm and swarm and swarm, and multiply therein. Just multiply as you're doing that. So, those are all of God's commands. We see commands several times to fill the earth and multiply in it. We see not eating the blood, and we see taking justice for murder. Those are the commands God gives. Now we get to changes in the earth. And this goes back to what Pastor asked about the curse in the ground. Notice chapter 8, verse 21. The Lord says, I will not again curse the ground anymore for man's sake. The word man's sake does not mean for the good of man. It's not saying doing something for the sake of somebody else. It's because of what man did. Because of what man did, the Lord cursed the ground all the way back in Genesis 3. We still see the thorns and thistles part of that curse. We still see the thorns and thistles part of that curse. But if you live in an area where farming is easy and you are a farmer, There are definitely areas of the earth where farming is not easy. But you live in an area where farming is easy, it's a lot less work to raise more than enough food than you need for your family and such. Like you need to keep all the weeds away, you need to keep sowing at the right times, and otherwise things just grow. Remember, before the flood, the earth would basically have been semi-tropical, beautiful. It seems like things would grow and grow and grow, but apparently they didn't. God had a curse on ground, so it was hard, even in that perfect environment, for men to raise enough food to live. It kind of needed to be that way because men would live 900 years, probably most of that in the prime of their health, and things get boring so fast and the human heart tends towards evil so fast, things will get worse and worse and worse, except for apparently men had to work so hard to raise enough food for themselves that there was not as much time for pursuits like, well, we'll find out later what gets Sodom into trouble. They had a lot less time for that. That's the implication. And then after the flood, we don't have that extra curse on the ground. It's not extra difficult to raise things in perfect environments. You find the right environment, you raise the right plants for that environment. It's difficult to make money. It's not difficult to raise enough food for your family compared to what it was back then. That's how I see this passage, because I think the Lord is very clearly saying he's not cursing the ground anymore. You go back to the first passage, what did the curse on the ground means? It means Adam, by the sweat of his face shall he eat bread. Like bread is like the easiest thing to raise. Raising grains and such, you're like raising grass. If there's anything that's easy to raise, it's that. And God is telling Adam, you will need to work, you'll need to sweat even to do that, even to get bread. So, is it like that anymore? Not if you're in the right environment. That's the part I see as what this is referencing. What other changes do we see? Verse 22. While the earth remaineth, seed time and harvest. Before the earth being semi-tropical, you could basically plant whenever you want. You could harvest whenever it was grown, and you could plant and you could harvest. You had flexibility there. Nowadays, it doesn't matter where you live. If you live in the jungles, you still need to plant right before the wet season, and you need to harvest right as the dry season starts, and plant again for the next wet season. As well as other areas, obviously. You plant in the spring, you harvest in the fall. There are specific times for planting and harvesting now. That has changed. Why? The next line, and cold and heat. We have cold and heat now. Before, it was probably just uniformly warm. The earth was designed so that Adam and Eve could live in that without clothes, in their innocence. That means uniform temperature, that means no discomfort there. Now we have cold and heat. No matter where you live on the earth, you're either going to face one of the two or both. There is no place on the earth that has perfect temperatures all year round. The closest you get to that are cities like San Diego, and that's why a lot of people like to live there. Then you have summer and winter. We have the summer, the fully hot season, winter, the fully cold season. Before, the earth probably didn't have that. Once again, the evidence I brought up last week, there are frozen palm trees in Antarctica. That's a very, very strong evidence that the earth used to have a very close uniform climate all the way around, because it doesn't take much thought to realize that palm trees never grow in Antarctica. So, what else? Day and night shall not cease. This is important to the future promises that God will make. God makes several of them using the faithfulness of his promise to keep the day and the night. That will not change until we enter eternity and there is no night. Any questions here so far? Yes.
It's not being read off of it. My understanding, like Revelation says, that the holy city will have no night, but the rest of God's kingdom will have day and night, but there won't be sun or stars to light God's presence in light.
So, the only thing I think was different in the way I read that is it's very clear. The Lord their God gives them light, and there shall be no night there. Whereas they're talking about the New Jerusalem, and they shall reign forever and ever. That part's very clear. There's a part, it needed no sun to light it, for the Lamb is the light thereof. Seems to be talking about the whole of the new earth. So, in general, there very clearly is no sun, and it seems that, at least in my reading, the Lord provides light to the entirety of the new earth for all of eternity. That he himself is the light, as it says. So, there are no passages that would say that there is any night in the new earth. The one passage that you mentioned, there shall be no night there, is talking specifically about the New Jerusalem. So I see how you implied from that there is night everywhere else. That is never what I'd thought about reading that passage, though. So, brings us to chapter 9, verse 2. Chapter 9, verse 2. And the fear of you and the dread of you shall be upon every beast of the earth, upon every fowl on the earth, upon all that moveth upon the earth, and upon all the fishes of the sea. So, basically everything that has intelligence at all will have the fear and the dread of man. Before the flood, animals were not scared of man. Presumably Noah had no difficulty at all getting the elephant into the ark or anything like that. Nowadays, elephants are very easily scared, and unless it's a tame elephant who's been born in captivity, you do not want to get anywhere near an elephant and try to get the elephant to do anything at all. Things have changed. What does the fear and the dread mean? Fear is the same word used as in the fear of the Lord. It's the idea of a respectful fear, a reverence, watching out, taking seriously. That is, animals will take man seriously and there will be a respect there. The dread is the idea of total terror. And the word is so strong, it's only used 5 times in the Bible. And twice it's used in its literal sense, which means just to break something into tiny pieces. And then 2 other times it's used in the sense of fear. It's a very, very strong word for that animals are terrified of men. And unless you have animals born in captivity or born around people, that is absolutely true. Even bears and such, they will fight a person if there is some reason they need to. Usually you will never see the bear because the bear will stay away from you. Usually that's what happens. Every animal has fear of mankind. Snakes usually only bite people when the person steps on or near the snake. They're not going out of their way to try to bite people. God has done this for both protection. To protect the animals. Imagine now that people can eat meat and such, if the animals weren't scared and it wasn't hard, like say to hunt a buffalo, and you could just go up to the buffalo, take the buffalo out and barbecue the next few days, animals will be wiped out very quickly. But it's also for the protection of man. Animals are dangerous now. There's meat-eating carnivores and such that would normally look upon men as food. But God put the fear of man into the hearts of animals to protect man as well.
So
Yes.
do you think prior to the flood that lions and tigers and bears were friendly nature?
So I would say they were not carnivorous. An indication is God doesn't tell Noah about bringing any meat with him onto the ark in any way. He's just that gather of the plants and all the herbs that can be eaten, because the implication is everything in the ark would be eating all those herbs. Nowadays, we know with vegetables, a lot of lions in captivity are raised entirely on a diet of vegetables. If you don't teach the lion how good eating meat is, it won't try to hunt anything. It will just look for the vegetables and fruits it's eating. Animals, as far as I know, every type of land animal can live perfectly healthy on a diet of only vegetables. But I would use the passage with what God told to bring them as food as indication that before this time, animals weren't carnivorous. There is no place in the Bible that does say when animals became carnivorous, though, although it's very clear that in the Garden of Eden, animals were not. Brings us then to what other changes do we have? This is one of the most strange statements in the Bible. Genesis chapter 9, verse 5. And surely your blood of your lives will I require. This part is straightforward. God's saying, I'm going to require human life now, and I'm going to treat it differently than I did in the past. At the hand of every beast will I require it. I've never heard anybody try to make a theology based on this. My guess is if you did, every part of your theology will be wrong. But God is saying here that in some way he's even going to hold wild animals accountable if they kill men. How, why, what? Animals don't have eternal souls. What's happening here? I don't think I have ever or will ever see a good explanation, but God is saying, you are made in God's image, you're made in my image, and because of that, I'm going to require every life at the hand of every beast and man whenever somebody's killed. Yes?
I was just thinking, the law talks about that very thing. If you have an animal that used to push and, butt its horns into, and
Yeah.
you don't keep it, and it killed, that he says you're to
Yep.
take that life for that animal.
Well, I remember if it's an animal, it injures any person past a certain degree or kills the person, the animal is killed. If the animal was known to be aggressive, the person's life is also forfeit, but he can pay off his own life by paying as the judges determine. Otherwise, the person himself is executed for basically second-degree murder, keeping an animal around that could kill people.
So, anyway, I think that would fit in with this about every beast.
Absolutely, as well as the millennial kingdom, that the lion will eat straw like the ox, and the young child, the idea of being a young infant, putting his hand into a viper's den. The one way to guarantee you get bitten by a snake is to put your hand down the snake's den. And in the millennial kingdom, it's safe to do that. Animals do not attack. There's no hurting and no destruction. Then, let's see where we are in time. A few more minutes. Getting to the most important part of this chapter, God's covenant on the second side. Yes,
I'm sorry.
no problem.
Verse 3,
Okay, yep.
I take it that's another change, that now they can, eat meat.
Yes, I guess you're right. I thought I had talked about that before. I did not. Yes, God has given all people every moving thing that liveth. When I looked up what those words are, it's basically everything that creepeth upon the earth. And the same is used earlier in creation. It's the same phrasing there. And he is basically saying everything that moves on the earth, from the previous verse, the fish of the sea, are given as food. Now, not everything would be desirable to eat, but everything can be eaten now. You don't have to worry about breaking a command of God if you have to randomly eat something that you normally wouldn't. So, we then continue with what does the word covenant mean? It normally means a two-sided promise, but a lot of the covenants God gives are one-sided promises, where God has said, look, there are two parties here. There's me and you, two parties, but all of what's going to happen is all of me doing something. A lot of the covenants God does are that way. The word means a two-sided promise, both in English as well as in Hebrew. But God is saying here, because of my faithfulness and my goodness, I'm not requiring anything for this. I am just promising something. So let's look at what God's promising here. We already talked about changes, not cursing the ground anymore, and summer, winter seed time, harvest day and night still happening. Let's go to verse 8. Do I have a volunteer to read verse 8 to 12? Verse 8 to 12. Go ahead, Gary.
And God spake unto Noah and to his sons with him, saying, I, behold, I establish my covenant with you and with your seed after you, and with every living creature that is with you, of the fowl, and cattle, and of every beast
Thank you very much. So the reason we read to verse 12 now is at the end of verse 12, God says between who this covenant is and for how long this covenant is. So between who is it? Me, that's God, and you and every living creature that is with you. If you look further up in the verse, God's on verse 8, he's speaking to Noah and his sons. So he's saying the covenant is between me, between you and your sons, and every living creature that is with you. So God is making a covenant to all life, Noah and his sons included. And notice how long it says, for perpetual generations. Perpetual generations, the only difference between that and everlasting is perpetual generations ends when the earth ends. He's saying, I'm making a covenant for the entire lifespan of the earth, that there will never again be a flood that will destroy the earth, and never again will I cut off all flesh with the waters of a flood. 2 parts there. So God is making a covenant with all life on the earth for the entire time the earth is around. And the 2 parts, not destroying the earth with a flood and not cutting off all life with a flood. Any questions here?
I just noticed a little phrase that's repeated often, with you. It's constantly, the Lord says, all the animals that are with you, I'll make my covenant with you. There's another couple more. Or something.
Yes, 5 or 6 in these verses. And we will briefly jump ahead to verses 15 and 16. The Lord says on this, when he sees a rainbow, I will remember my covenant, which is between me and you and every living creature of all flesh, and the waters shall no more become a flood to destroy all flesh. And the bow shall be in the cloud, and I will look upon it, that I may remember the everlasting covenant between God and every living creature of all flesh that is upon the earth. So, God's saying when he looks upon the rainbow, which he's going to establish as a sign that he'll remember his covenant. Obviously, God doesn't need any reminder to help him remember. There's no problem there at all. So why does God say that I'm making this sign that I'll remember my covenant? It's because we need a reminder on the earth. It's not that God does, people do. Realize this, Noah and his sons have only seen rain so far as in the flood that destroyed the entire earth. When they see rain, they're thinking death and dying and destruction because that's what they've seen. And God is saying, look, every time you see these clouds and the sun is shining, there'll be a bow in the cloud, and that's me remembering my covenant to never again destroy all the earth the way I've done. And we know for the rest of the history of the earth, rain brings life. If you don't have rain, nothing grows, you have a problem. The rain is very important. Noah and his sons have to settle in a place where there's rain. They can't stay away from it. And God's using that just as it was God's destruction. Now it's a sign of God's faithfulness and protection that God will not destroy the earth again. So, any questions here? That's the most important part of this. God establishes a covenant. He gives the rainbow as a sign to show basically Noah and his family his protection, because all they've seen rain happen caused before his destruction. And God said, look, it's a promise of my protection.
It is interesting that it's called a bow, because that's what we see, but I always take note that when you see it from above, if you see a rainbow, it's a total
Yeah, it's a full circle.
Yeah, so it looks like a ring, and just thinking of perpetual, there's no end to a ring.
Yeah. I heard years ago there's no answer in physics to how a rainbow is created. Then I got far enough in physics, there is. It's straightforward how a rainbow is created, but it only happens with liquids that have high refractive indexes, fancy term, like water and a few other liquids. Most liquids don't cause, like if you were to use a thin oil, you would not get an oil bow. It's water and it's liquids that have high thicknesses. And a lot of the liquids that have high indexes of refraction, they bend light a lot. They are also, the droplets are too big to create a rainbow. It mainly occurs with water and things that are very close to water. All that to say, getting back to finishing in the last couple minutes, getting to a stopping point, we have the sign of God's covenant is a rainbow. I will leave Noah's genealogy to next week. Sign of God's covenant is a rainbow. And God says, look, I will set it in the cloud between me and you, then I'll remember my covenant. It's also that people remember God's covenant. That people remember we can trust the Lord to provide. Good or evil, we can trust the Lord. He provides everything on this earth. God's goodness is greater than the iniquity of men. God's justice is also greater than the iniquity of men, but that's another time for another passage. Brings us then to, because rain will bring life, and Noah and his family would be seeing a lot of rain for the last several hundred years. God's using this to be a reminder of his faithfulness rather than to be a reminder of the judgment that God has just instituted. Any last comments on this study? Because that was everything I wanted to cover there. We will talk about the imagination of man's heart being evil from his youth tomorrow in context with Noah and his family and what's going to happen in the rest of this chapter. Let's close in prayer. Dear Lord God, I thank you for today and for the reminder of this passage and how you provided for the life that you had delivered, as well as for the earth, for Noah and his families. And you'd even given a reminder for him and for all of us all the way through generations of your faithfulness in a rainbow. We pray that this passage, as well as the trust we have in you and your unchanging nature, would continue to grow us towards you in faith, that we might become more like your Son. In Jesus' name, amen.